How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're on Daf Chaf Aleph, Daf 21 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends, friends, today, today we talk about some tech. Well, the first half kind of talks about some technical stuff, right? Yesterday at the end of the Daf, we were talking about these like questions of Rav Huna bar Chinna to Rav Sheshes, and they're kind of technical questions that you just kind of like have to work through. So we're going to do some of that stuff, and then we're going to talk about like doormen and stuff a little bit on Daf Chaf Aleph Mud Beis. So Chaf Aleph Mud Beis is much easier than Chaf Aleph Mud Aleph, but as I mentioned yesterday, at yesterday's Daf, that I actually recorded the end of it just a few minutes ago because I didn't have time to finish it on Friday, so I had to finish it today. I'm also in a humongous rush. I haven't told you why I'm in a humongous rush. I'm going to save that. I'm hoping that tomorrow's Daf, it'll be clearer why I'm in a tremendous rush right now. If I manage to chaparine, I think it could be interesting. Okay, so now, also I want to say, Reb Andy, it was very nice to meet you this morning at WeWork. It was funny, Maise. We were in WeWork on I think maybe Friday, and the thing is at WeWork they have issues with the fire alarms. It's actually pretty dangerous because the fire alarms go off all the time, and it's always false. So I mean, God forbid one day there should be a fire, nobody would even budge. So anyways, we had a fire alarm, and then Reb Andy passed by my office, and he was like, Aren't you gonna like go anywhere? I said, look, if I was a betting fellow, I would imagine that it was a false alarm. Also, the fire alarm had been going off for like hours before then. And then that was the other day. And then Rabbi Andy came over to me and said, "Oh, when I asked you about the fire alarm, I recognized your voice. I listened to Babylon Talmud." I said, "Oh, Gavaldik." And he said, and part of the reason why I'm saying this is he said that he found out about Babylon Talmud from Rabbi Hillel Lester, a friend. So Rabbi Hillel, thanks for the referral. I got stuff to do. Okay, it says so hi Reb Andy, Shkoyach Reb Hillel, we gotta go weiter. Ba mine Rav Huna bar Chinna me Rav Sheshes. So Rav Huna bar Chinna asked a kasha from Sheshes. A mocher bayis bebate are choma. Okay, so a fellow who sells a house in a walled city, right? That we were talking about yesterday. That he's got 1 year to redeem it after. Oh my gosh. Okay, he's got 1 year to redeem it. That's I have a train that I need to catch in an hour and a half. Hopefully I'll make it. Well, I guess I have a half an hour to do this stuff. I don't know. Okay, but probably the best way to do it is to go weiter. So, a fellow sells a house in a Batei Ori Choma, and we had said yesterday that he's got 1 year to redeem it, and if he doesn't redeem it within a year, he loses it. He will never get it back. Not Yovel, not nothing. So nigol lekrovim o eno nigol lekrovim. And the shaila is, is there a mitzvah for the relatives to redeem it for him so he doesn't lose it? And if the relatives come and knock on the door of the buyer and say, hey buyer, we want to buy back the property, he's got to go along. He's got to go along with it. So gulasu misteachuza gomar. Do we learn out exer shava from steachuza? Masteachuza eno nigeles lachatzoin v'nigeles likrovim. That by steachuza you can't buy it back 50%, as we learned yesterday, but relatives can buy it back. So avhainami, so oichedu, when it comes to Batei Ori Choma, ein nigel lachatzoin v'nigel likrovim. So you can't redeem it 50%, as we learned yesterday according to the rabbis. V'nigol lekrovim, and it can be redeemed by relatives. Or dilma, or perhaps kiksiva gula b'chatzoinu dichsev, that when we have the gzer shava of gula from Batei Ori Choma and steachuza, that's only with regard to the fact that neither one can be redeemed 50%. Bikrovim lo ksiv, but vis-a-vis relatives, we don't compare them. And steachuza could be redeemed by relatives, but not so Batei Ori Choma. So that's the shaila. By Batei Ori Choma, can relatives redeem it for the fellow or nisht? Omar lei. So Rav Sheshes answers, Eino nigel by Batei Ori Choma. The relatives do not have, are not able to compel the buyer to sell it back to the seller. Meaning they can't buy it back from the seller against the seller's will. Fine. What? They can't buy it back from the buyer against the buyer's will. Fine. Eisve. But Rav Huna bar Chinna asks kasha. B'chol gula titnu. That it says in the context of stei achuza. It says b'chol gula titnu, that by all things there should be a gula, a redemption. The rabbos to include batim ve'eved ivri, to include batim, houses, and Jewish avodim. Okay, my love. No, what's this b'chol gula titnu? Bate arichoma. I'm sorry. So when it says the rabbos batim, which houses? Bate arichoma. So talking about bate arichoma, to say that bate arichoma are like stei achuza, in that we include that relatives can buy it back. Lo bate chatzerim. No, the houses that we're talking about are not bate arichoma. They are houses in open cities that did not have a wall, that do not have a wall from the time of Joshua. We are not talking about bate arichoma. Bate chatzerim be'edjek sivu. But by bate chatzerim, I don't need to learn that the relatives can redeem it, because we have a pasuk al stei haaretz yichoshev, that they will be considered like the stei haaretz, like the stei achuza. So ahu the kova chova. Yeah, but still we need b'chol gula to teach us that it's a obligation for the relatives to redeem the bate chatzerim. But it doesn't teach us jack squat about bate arechoma. V'ali b'der Rabbi Eliezer, and this is like Rabbi Eliezer, meaning when it says b'chol gula titnu, is to teach the chova by bate chatzerim. That is like Rabbi Eliezer the Tanis. We learn in the brayso v'goal es mimkar ochiv, and he will redeem the pasuk right, that if a fellow sells his stei achuza, okay. So it says v'gal is mimkar achiv. So a relative will come and he will redeem his his brother's property. Rishus, this is a voluntary thing. He doesn't have to. It's voluntary. It's optional. Wait, maybe the relatives have to redeem the stei achuza. So, wait one second. Okay, fine. Okay, now, maybe it's an obligation. So, well, it says by stei achuza that if a fellow doesn't have. One second. Okay. There's so many psukim over here in so many different contexts. I just have to keep on making sure that these psukim are what I think they are. Okay. Goel. So let's start again. 3 lines up. So it says by stei achuza that a relative will redeem the property that was sold by his brother. The stei achuza that was sold by his brother. Rishus. It's optional for the relative to do that. Wait, is it optional? Maybe it's obligatory. Therefore it says v'ish ki lo yeh goel. Therefore it says, well, and if a fellow doesn't have a relative to redeem it for him, so then he redeems it himself. Is there any yid in Israel that doesn't have any relatives? Meaning, okay, potentially we say a convert maybe doesn't have relatives, but the thing is, we're talking about people who had ancestral lands, which means that clearly, they were Yidden at the time of Yoshua ben Nun. So clearly you have to have some relative, even if it's not a first degree relative, it's a second degree relative, there's somebody who would be on the line to redeem it. So Rabbi Yeshua says, we learn from here that, well, yeah, there are relatives, but none of them are interested in redeeming it, and they don't have to. So we see, according to Rabbi Yeshua, it is optional for the relatives to redeem the stei achuza. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says, "V'goal es mimkar achiv chova." Rabbi Eliezer says that when it says that the relative will redeem his brother's stei achuza, that is an obligation. Ata Omer Chova, are you saying it's an obligation? Oinu Ela Rishus, wait, maybe it's optional. Tamlomar Bechol Gula Titnu Kasuv Kvo Chova. That's why we have the pasuk says Bechol Gula Titnu, that the pasuk is saying that it is an obligation. So we see that Bechol Gula Titnu is coming to teach us that by Steachuza it is taka an obligation to redeem. Right there by Steachuza it's taka an obligation. It's not optional to redeem the property that was sold. For a relative to redeem the property that was sold. Okay, so basically what that means is that the relative who's closest in line has an obligation to redeem the property, and if he doesn't have, right, we say, if he doesn't have the money, if that first relative who has the obligation just simply doesn't have the money, so then the fellow could buy it back himself. Fine. Amr Rabbanon the Ravashi. So the rabbi says, say to Ravashi, V'amr Ravina the Ravashi. Bishlam Lamanda Amr the rabbis Bate Ore Choma. So I understand according to the Manda Amr that says Bechol Gula Titnu comes to include Bate Ore Choma. Hanu Dichsev Bechol. That's what it means in all cases to include Bate Ore Choma. Ella the Manda Amr the rabbis Bate Chatzerim. But if you say it's Bate Chatzerim, my Bechol. Why do I need Bechol? Just say, right? We already know the comparison we said, right, that we said Bate Chatzerim she'ein lehem choma, right, it says Al stei haaretz yechashiv. We already compared Bate Chatzerim to stei achuza, so we already know that that it can be redeemed by relatives. So why do I need Bechol? So kasha, so why would I? So it's a kasha. Eis ve'abai. So now Abai asks a kasha on Rav Sheshes, who says that that Bate Arichoma are not redeemed by relatives. Okay. Hey, so Abai asks a kasha. Matam lama yigalenu. It says by in Eved Ivri who sold to in Ovid Kochavim. It says yigalenu 3 times. Gimel Paimim. The Rabbos Kol Hagulos Shenigalos Kaseder Azeh, to teach that by all of the redemptions they are redeemed in this way. That first it is right the uncle, and then the first cousin, then other relatives. There's an order based on how close of a relative you are. My love. So what are all like Kol Hagulos? What are all of these redemptions? Bate Are Choma ve'Eved Ivri. It must be Bate Are Choma and Eved Ivri to say that they are redeemed by relatives. So Bate Arichoma are redeemed by relatives. Lo Bate Chaserim V'stei Achuza. No, it's talking about Bate Chaserim. It's not talking about Bate Arichoma. It's talking about these houses in kind of unwalled cities. So Bate Chaserim V'stei Achuza and ancestral properties. Bate Chaserim V'stei Achuza Behedrik Siv. But it already says explicitly by Bate Chaserim and Stei Achuza Al Stei Aretz Yechashiv, that they will be considered like Stei Aretz, which are redeemed by relatives. Kedam Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Likarav Kodem, that it's coming to teach us that, right, the order of the relatives, to teach that just like by an Eved Ivri you sold to an Ovid Kochavim, it's, first the uncle, then the first cousin, etc. So it's also in that order when it comes to Batei Chatzerim and Stei Achuza. Hachanami, the Karav Kodem. So just like Rav Nachman says, Rav bar Yitzchak says in a different context, the Karav Kodem. So here also by Batei Chatzerim and Stei Achuza, we're talking about the Karav Kodem. Heichit med Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Now, where is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's statement that we're drawing from? Aha, the Ibayalu, it's on this which they asked, Eved Ivri, Hanimka the Yisrael, an Eved Ivri who sold to a Yid. Nigal Akrovim, Weinu Nigal Akrovim, do his relatives have a mitzvah to redeem him or not? Because the relatives redeeming is specifically by an Eved Ivri who sold to an Ovid Kochavim. What about an Eved Ivri who sold to Yisrael? Now, Aliba the Rebbe lo tibaylach. Now, according to Rebbe, we saw the other day, right? It says, what is it? Be'im ba'ele lo yigoel. V'im lo yigoel ba'ele. Right? We said that specifically Krovim is specifically by an Eved Ivri who sold to an Ovid Kochavim, but not by an Eved Ivri who sold to Yisrael. So therefore, there's no question according to Rebbe, that somebody who's not redeemed by relatives, i.e. an Eved Ivri sold to a Yid, goes free after 6 years. So according to Rebbe, certainly the relatives do not redeem him. The kasha is aliba the Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan who don't agree with Rebbe. What do we say? Do we learn out the Gzeir Shava of Sachir to say that just like by an Eved Ivri sold to Ovdei Kochavim, there's a mitzvah for the relatives to redeem him. So just like there's a mitzvah there by the Ovdei Kochavim, so also by a Eved Ivri sold to a Yid, there's a mitzvah to redeem, for the relatives to redeem. Right? And we don't say Yigalenu, that specifically he is redeemed, i.e. the Eved Ivri sold to an Oved Kochavim. Or do we say no, Davka Yigalenu, that specifically he, the Eved Ivri sold to an Oved Kochavim, is redeemed by relatives, but not an Eved Ivri sold to Yisrael. So what's the halacha? Toshma, come in here. B'chol gula titnu, that by all of these people, right, there should be a gula, there should be a redemption, that they're redeemed by their relatives. L'rabos batim ve'eved ivri, to include houses and an Eved Ivri. My lav bate orichoma ve'eved ivri anim kol Yisrael, and an Eved Ivri who's sold to a Yid. So there you go. B'chol tu gula titnu. We want to say that it comes to teach that an Eved Ivri who's sold to a Yid can be redeemed by relatives. Lo nisht Eved Ivri anim kol oved kochavim. No, it's talking about an Eved Ivri who sold to an Oved Kochavim. Eved Ivri anim kol oved kochavim behedjek sivbei ododo ben dodo yigalenu. But 1 second. But the pasuk already says explicitly by an Eved Ivri who sold to a Yid that an Eved Ivri who sold to an Oved Kochavim says ododo ben dodo yigalenu. So we know that the relatives redeem him. How the kova chova, but bechol gula titnu is to teach the obligation that it's that it's not just a mitzvah to redeem in Eved Ivri sold to a Oved Kochavim, but it's taka, an obligation. And even according to Rabbi Yeshua, who had said that when it comes to somebody who sells stei achuza, it is optional to reshus, but when it comes to an Eved Ivri who sold to an Oved Kochavim, it's obligation to redeem him, because otherwise he's going to be spending too much time by the Ovdei Kochavim, which is not something that we want for a Yid. Tashma, come here. Matam lomer yigalenu gimel paimim. How come it says yigalenu 3 times by in Eved Ivri sold to an Ovdei Kochavim? L'rabos kol agulos shenegalos kaseder azeh, to teach that all of the redemptions are in this order. My lab bate arichoma. Eved Ivri, so let's say bate, that the right bechol, right, that these kol agulos is talking about bate arichoma. And in Eved Ivri, Hanim Kol Yisrael, that's sold to a Yid, lo, Batei Chatzerim, V'stei Achuza. No, it's talking about Batei Chatzerim and Stei Achuza, but nothing to do with Batei Arichoma. Batei Chatzerim Behedja Ksiv Behu. But it already says explicitly by Batei Chatzerim, Al Stei Ha'aretz Yechoshev, that they will be, right, that we compare Batei Chatzerim to Stei Achuza. So Menachem Bayitzchak, the Karav Kodem, yeah, but what it's coming to teach is that, first you start with the uncles and then the first cousin, etc. You start with the closest relatives. All right. What time is it? Okay. That is like the, highly technical, hard part of today's daf. I have 15 minutes until my target time to wrap up this daf because I got to get out of here. So let me see if we can do the rest of the daf in 15 minutes. Okay, but I think that this should not be too difficult. V'kona es atzma bayovel uvmisa sadon. In a doorman goes free at the Jubilee year, or if the Adon dies, Tichsiv Avado, that you will serve him, not his son, not his daughter, he goes free if the Adon dies, Le'olam Shel Yovel, until the Jubilee year, and at the Jubilee year, he goes free. Wait, I skipped the line, so let's back up. Sorry, back up a few lines. V'anirtza Nikne Beritzia, a doorman is acquired when you nail his ear to the door. That his Adon nails his ear to the door. Okay. So again, fine. The rabbis taught Martzea, when it says, so a Martzea apparently is an all. Google what an all is. A-W-L. Martzea, any other Martzea, so I know is an all. Okay, 1 second, I have to find the translation for these interesting tools. So they are, from where do I know to include in the class of valid instruments? The wooden peg. Whew. Okay, right. Nail them to the door with a wooden peg. The thorn, the needle, the auger, and the stylus. Oh, God. Back to Gemara. Tamalomar vilakachta. Therefore, the pasuk says vilakachta, to include all of these things. The Rabbos kol davar shenikach bayad, to include anything that you can take in your hand. If you can pierce an ear with it, it works. Tiv Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Omer says, Rabbi, Mamar tzeh miyuchot shamateches, avkol shamateches. Whereas Rabbi says, no, specifically you can use anything made out of metal, just like an awl. Okay. Tavracher, alternatively, Amar tzeh lahavi, Amar tzeh agadol. When it says Hamar tzeh, it's coming to include the big awl. Omar, Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Yudin bribi hayadoresh, that the Gadol Ador Yudin would teach that when they would nail him to the door by the ear, it would be through the earlobe. Now the Chacham say that an Eved Ivri cannot become a doorman, because by becoming a doorman and being nailed, getting his ear nailed to the door, so then he will become a Balmum, and therefore a Kohen can't become a doorman because he'll be a balmum to that. But now the Gemara says, I don't understand. In Tomar b'melsa ein rotzim, and if you say that they pierce his lobe, heach eved ivri kohen yosef balmum. So how would piercing his earlobe make him a balmum? It must be that it's the cartilage of the ear that is getting pierced, and that would make him a balmum. Now, what's the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda? Right? Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda said you could basically use anything that pierces, whereas Rebbe says no, it has to be made out of metal. So the Rebbe darish klali ufrate, that basically it's machlokas whether you learn klal ufrat uchlal or riboy umiut v'riboy, which is actually very interesting, right? The way that klal ufrat uchlal works. So a klal is when you have a general rule, so that would include everything. Then you have a prat. The prat limits it entirely to just that specific thing that is the specific, the prat. And then comes the second klal to say, actually, it's not just that one thing. It's coming to actually include anything similar to that one thing. That's how klal ufrat uchlal works. The klal includes everything. The prat limits it to just that one thing. The second klal comes to actually open it up again, but only to things similar to that one thing. Riboy, miut, and riboy is a little bit different. It's more inclusive. Riboy, just like the klal, riboy starts with everything. However, whereas in the prat, it limits it entirely to just that one thing, the miut, right, if you say riboy, the miut actually is more similar to a klal ufrat uchlal. Meaning, remember, by a klal, you have the first klal, the prat then limits it entirely to just that one thing. Then you have a second klal to open it up to anything similar. Now, if you're using riboy, miut, and riboy, that miut actually is limiting it to anything similar. You skip that step by riboy, miut, riboy. You skip that step where it is limited to just one thing. It's never limited to just one thing in a riboy, miut, riboy. It's limited to anything similar to that one thing. And then when you have the second riboy, it's once again coming to open it back up to absolutely everything. Well, then what's the point of the miut? It means that it's excluding just one thing, right? So whereas by klal ufrat uchlal, you're only sachakol including things similar to the prat and excluding everything else. In riboy, miut, riboy, you are actually coming to include absolutely everything, but the miut comes to exclude just one thing. So now, 1 second. I just had to rub my nose. Give me a second. Okay. Nose rubbed. But I'll probably have to do it again. So Micah Mifli, what's the machlokas between Rebbe who says that it's limited to just things made out of metal, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda who says that it could basically be anything that pierces? So the Rebbe darish klal ufrate, because Rebbe learns it out, klal ufrat uchlal. Vilakachta klal, when it says you'll take, that's the first klal which includes everything. Martzeya, in all prat, so that's a specific which limits it to only in all. Be'ozno v'delis, but then when it says his ear and the door, chazu v'chol, it's a second klal ufrat uchlal, yatadon ele ke'ena prat, so it's things that are similar to the specific. It's things that are like in all, i.e., Ma'aprat meforish shamateches av kol shamateches. Just like an awl is metal, so also anything made out of metal, that is Rebbe's opinion. But anything not made out of metal would be excluded. So like a wooden peg, for example, would be excluded. Whereas Rabbi Yossi darsh ribuye umiyute. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda learns out ribuye and miyut. Velakachta riba, right? So it includes anything. Martzeya mi'et. Whereas an awl limits it to only things that are similar to an awl, that they're made out of metal. Be'ozno v'delis chazav riba, a second riboy, riba umiyat v'riba, riba akol, it comes to include absolutely anything that pierces. My Rabbi komili, so it's including absolutely everything. My mi'et, well then what is it excluding? What's the role of the mi'ut? To exclude one thing, and that is mi'et some kind of potion, right? Some kind of, if you take some kind of liquid that you can drop on the ear and it'll, work its way through the ear and make a hole, you can't do that. Okay. We said earlier, Hamartzea, Lahavi Martzea Agadol. It says the all to include. I got 5 minutes. There's no way I'm gonna be done in 5 minutes. We'll get to the end. To include the all, my mashma. How does Hamartzea include a big all? So Kedamar Rava, it's like Rava says in the context of Gid Anoshe, explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Hayarech Hamiyumenes Shabiyarech, and it says Hayarech, it means the right one, the main one, the right one, the right thigh. So Achanami Hamartzeh Miyuchot Shebmartzeh, and also the all, the big all. Amar Rabbi Lazar said, Rabbi Lazar Yudin Bribi Hayadorish, that Yudin Bribi would darshan kshen rotzin in rotzin ella bemelsa, that when they would pierce the ear, it would be the earlobe. Machacham Omrim Ein Eved Ivri Koyin Nirtzam Pnei Shnaise Bamum. And the Chacham say that an Eved Ivri cannot become a doorman. That a Kohen cannot become a doorman because he'll be a Balmum. V'yosa Balmum, let him become a Balmum. Who really cares? Rabbi Rav Shila, Ma'ikra, V'shavel Mishpachto, that it says that at the Jubilee year he goes back to his family. Lemuchzak Sheb Mishpachto. He has to go back to the same status of his family, i.e., a Kohen who could serve in the Beis HaMikdash without a mum. Ibaylo de Asakasha, Eved Ivri Kohen, Maushim Tzelo Rabo, Shifcha Kenainis. If you have an Eved Ivri who is a Kohen, can his master give him can his Adon give him a Shifcha Kenainis? Right? We say that an Eved Ivri, his Adon can give him a Shifcha Kenainis. Does that also apply to Kohanim? Chidushu Loshna Kohanim Loshna Yisrael. Do we say, look, the whole Inyan of an Eved Ivri being able to be with a Shifcha Kenainis is a big Chidush. And that Chiddush applies to everybody. Yisrael, Kohen, no difference. Odilma Shiny Kohanim, or maybe we say, no, there is a difference. Kohanim are on a pedestal of their own. Hol V'riba, Boyen HaKosov Mitzvahs Yiseris. Since Kohanim have all sorts of special mitzvahs, maybe they should be restricted from being able to, if they're an Eved Ivri, being able to have a Shifcha Kananis. Rav Amar Mutter, Shmuel Amar Osir. Rav says it's Mutter, Shmuel says it's Osir for a Kohen Eved Ivri to be with a Shifcha Kenainis. Amli Rav Nachman Rav Anon, says Rav Nachman to Rav Anon, Ki avisu bei Mar Shmuel, when you were by the Bismedrash of Mar Shmuel, right? Ki avisu bei Mar Shmuel, when you were by the Bismedrash of Mar Shmuel, Beiskumdrei itlalisu, were you playing games? My time lo temule, why didn't you ask in the following kasha? How could you say that a Kohen Eved Ivri cannot be with a Shifcha Knainis? Mehav HaChacham in Eved Ivri Kohen Nirtzim Pnei Shnaise Bamum, that the Chacham said that a Kohen cannot become a doorman specifically because by becoming a doorman he'll become a Bamum. But one second, Vim Tomar Ein Rabba Mosul Shifcha Knainis, but if you say that his Adon cannot give him a Shifcha Knainis, well then there's another reason why he can't become a doorman, not just because he's going to be a Balmum, but Oichit, typically, the way that a doorman becomes a doorman is when he approaches his Adon, and he says, look, I don't want to go free because I love my Shifcha Kenainis wife. But the thing is, if you're going to say that a Kohen, Eved Ivri, can't have a Shifcha Kenainis, so then there's another reason why he can't go free, because he wouldn't be able to say, he doesn't have a Shifcha Kenainis wife, who he would have to be separated from. Sulamidin, we say that's Taka Kasha. It must be that, therefore, that an Eved Ivri Kohen can become a doorman like Rav. Kohen Mau B'Yifas Tor. Can a Kohen be with an Eishes Yifas Torah, right? The Yidden go to war. There's halacha that if you find in the war an Eishes Yifas Torah, you can marry her. So, does that apply to Kohanim as well? Chiddushu loshna kohen v'loshna Yisrael. Do we say the whole concept of Eishes Yifas Torah is a big chiddush, and therefore, it applies to anybody, Kohen, Yisrael? O Dilma, shiny Kohanim, ho'ovi b'boy and mitzvah siseris. Or maybe we say, look, Kohanim are on their own separate pedestal, and the halachas of Eishes Yifas Torah do not apply to Kohanim. Rav Amar Mutter, Shmuel Amar Osir. Rav says it's Mutter, Shmuel says it's Osir. Now look, both Rav and Shmuel agree that by the Bia Rishona, regardless of if you're Israel or a Kohen, it would be permitted. The whole concept of Eishes Yifas Torah is that the Torah is acknowledging the people's Yetzer Hara. That, look, the people are going to have a terrible Yetzer Hara, and as we're going to see in a minute, right, better that they should, do something that is not ideal, but at least do it in a permitted way in the context of marriage rather than in an Osir way. So when it comes to the first Bia, so everyone agrees, look, it's a response to the Yetzer Hara, and everybody has Yetzer Hara, whether you're Kohen, whether you're Yisrael. Kiplike, the machlokas is the Bia Shnia. By the second Bia, when you already got it out of your system somewhat, Rav Amar Mutter, v'Shmuel Amar Osir. Rav says it's Mutter, Shmuel says it's Osir. Rav Amar Mutter, ho v'Ishtarya Ishtri. Rav says, look, if it's permitted, it's permitted. Doesn't matter if it's the first Bia or the second Bia. V'Shmuel Amar says Shmuel, Osir. De'ohavila Gioris. Says Shmuel, no, the second Bia is Osir because she's a Gioris, she's a convert. V'Gioris l'koyin l'chazeh, and a Gioris cannot be with a Kohen. Those who say B'Bia Shnia Kuliyam lo pligi de Asira. Ta'avila Gioris. Look, everyone agrees, both Rav and Shmuel say that when it comes to Bia Shnia, no chance. Because she's a Gioris, and the Kohen can't be with the Gioris. Ki pligi, the machlokas is B'Bia Rishona by the first Bia. Rav Amar Mutter, Rav says that it's Mutter, Dehalo Zibatoria Keneged Yetzer Hara, because the Torah is speaking to a person's Yetzer Hara, and that Yetzer Hara applies to Kohanim as well. Kohanim also have Yetzer Haras. Ushmuel Amar Osir, where Shmuel says no, even the first Bia is Osir, because Kolechid the Karina Bey, V'Aveisal Toch Beisecha, that only where you can apply the pasuk of Avesal Toch Beisecha, you'll bring her home with you. Karina Bey, V'Ra'isa B'Shivya. Only in that context can we say V'Ra'isa B'Shivya, right? That the halachos of Eishes Yifas Torah. Kol echad lo Karina Bey V'Avesal Toch Beisecha, lo Karina Bey V'Ra'isa B'Shivya. And wherever we don't say V'Avesal Toch Beisecha, i.e. in context where you cannot bring her home with you, where you wouldn't be able to remain married with her, then you can't. Then the halachos of Eishes Yifas Torah do not apply b'chlal according to Shmuel. You will find in captivity b'shas shivya. It has to be at the time that you see her. That is when you can make the choice about Eishes Yifas Torah, but not after not at a later point. Eishes afilu Eishes ish, even if she was married to a fellow in the community that she lived in, you could still the halachos of Eishes Yifas Torah apply. Yifas Torah, lo dibur Torah l'keneged Yetzer Hara. It says Yifas Torah, that she's very beautiful. This halacha is specifically speaking to a fellow's Yetzer Hara. Mutav sheyochlu yisrael b'sar tmusis shchutis, vayochlu b'sar tmusis nevelas. If you have an animal that's sick and is going to die, better slaughter it, and at least you'll be eating slaughtered meat rather than to let it die and then eat nevela. You shouldn't be eating this sick meat anyways, but at least, if you're going to eat it, slaughter it first. V'chashakta, you will have a desire, even if she's not particularly beautiful, but for whatever reason you have some desire. Ba, v'lo ba v'chaverta, one per customer, right? Her, not her and her friend. V'lakachta, likuchen yeshlach l'chaba. V'lakachta, there is actually marriage there, right? Even though, she may have been compelled to convert, that's not the kosher conversion. Still, the marriage works. L'chal isha shleikach shtei noshim achaslova achaslova. For you, for a wife, you can't take two and give one for yourself, one for your father. Achaslova achaslov. No, one for you, one for your son. No, you can't do it. And bring her home. Don't just be with her during the war. No, take her home, and go through the process. Friends, that was the Chaf Aleph of Masechet Kiddushin. I hope you managed to enjoy. I have to get out of here. Peace out.